Welcome to the second game from Beachhead 2023, in which these delightfully colourful or colourful-ish Assyrians in their sort of slightly static poses, which I always think is good for sort of biblical era troops, take on a Seleucid army in this competition that went up to the early classical, just at the very first knockings of the Roman Empire. So let's have a see how these chaps did. And here's the setup for the game. There's quite a lot of terrain actually on table, not too much from me. There's one of my fields and a small piece of brush or something from there, and then a few other big chunks of terrain dotted around the map. What you've got here is a big wall of pikemen with some Roman argyaspids either side, I believe. There are some slightly more mediocre spearmen perhaps here. The couple of cataphracts, which I'm quite worried about in this army. Their heavy armour and their ability to punch through infantry is tricky. And over here is the textbook Elephant and Thracian command. I think it's a mediocre elephant possibly, with 4 Thracians either side, a little light camel, big screen of light infantry across the front, and light horse. So there's not probably some cavalry in the back there, but it's not stretching across the table. That bit of rough terrain, well, in fact the sheer size of the army means it's sort of slightly spread with a gap there. There could be something in that ambush. What have I done? Textbook, the 2 chariots in the middle ready to go either way. This is the command with looks like the big block of heavy infantry, 3 heavy infantry there, sort of ready to take on those pikes and try and use their armour and their elite status to grind down the pikemen. A couple of shooters here, and then I must have potentially, I've got some ambushes, or I suspect my cavalry over here. The smaller medium foot command with its cavalry is over here facing off the Thracians and the elephants, which is going to be interesting because the Thracians could do an awful lot of damage to these fairly weak in combat guys, but they can't really stand up in the open against my mounted particularly well. But the elephant sort of cures that, but it's a wide formation. There's a lot of interesting things could happen here in the way this one pans out. So let's have a look at the enemy army. So you can see 4 pikemen, 1's elite, embedded general in it, a couple of armoured imitation legions, 2 levy lurking at the back, a lot of skirmishers and a scythe beastie just to come piling through and cause trouble. That's that command you saw on the right. 4 Thracians, an elephant, normal elephant by the looks of it, and a light camelry, misspelled that one terribly in the wiki. And then over on the other side, 2 cataphracts, 2 poor medium cavalry. Not as good as you normally expect to see in some of these armies. They're a bit filler. Makes it a very big army though. Light horse javelin, 2 poor spearmen. So other than the cataphracts, that left-hand side, as we look at it, of this army, is a little bit patchy. A bowman, another side chariot there. Again, a lot rely on that to cause some trouble. So over here, what happens? You can see this whole lot sort of drifts over to the right. This is something that can be mobbed. Those pikemen are going to struggle to get in. The chariots don't really want to be fighting them at all, so they may as well come over here and try and sort of overwhelm this. And with these infantry drifting out to the edge of the table where that huge sea is drifting over there, they're immediately trying to get into bow range, see if they can kill off this light camel and just force themselves into this gap here so that the cavalry can sort of face off against the middle and maybe sort of start to chew away the ends of this dangerous but not really that wide formation. This is pile onto these and then see what happens. What's happening on the rest of the table? On the other side, yeah, the cavalry you didn't see at deployment are racing forwards. There may be something hiding back there, but they just want to try and pin these guys all into place and stop all the pikemen, all the argydaspids, all the cataphracts doing too much. So not a lot is really happening here other than my medium foot are sort of, actually no, these could be the heavy, yeah, sorry, these are the heavy foot. The 2 elite heavy foot, the 2 shooters are just trying to get to the end of the line. You know, there's a real strategy of not trying to face the pikemen and the argydaspids here. Potentially they're going to have to take on these cataphracts, but this is generally better just because these guys are quite poor quality. And if they come forwards, the cavalry can start to do something as well. It's just avoid the pikemen. That's the game. And you can see here what's happened is the pikemen have moved up and the cataphracts have turned very, very slow to turn and have started marching this way. But this army, if we just dance back to the list, is like, these are ordinary generals. They haven't got a huge amount of command and control. So moving cataphracts around is moving them at any distance is kind of going to be tricky. So they're shoving those cataphracts over there. They've left some of the spearmen behind as they move across. The pikemen look like they split up as well to create a gap for the cataphracts to reposition themselves. But big hole in my army here that these guys are not the chaps to race through, or not the chaps to race into. The shooters here are looking to get into some shots along with their bow arm cavalry into this kind of weak and squishy end of the army. The medium cavalry are very vulnerable to shooting, and do some damage to that, plough into that, and just really avoid, as I've said before, these dangerous pikemen and argyaspids. So as you can see, that pike block has split, ready for the cataphracts to come through. I've got a heavy infantry lurking there just to keep them honest, but they are coming across in front of their Thracians to try and force my chariots to take on pike, scythe chariots, the whole thing. They're really focusing on this. If you remember when I talked about the command structure, it's very easy to focus on these two chariots, but there's only two of them, and a lot of the rest of the army is actually sort of a shooting and fighting army. This lot look like they've come way back over into this way. Maybe they've turned again to get out of the way, which is leaving my my medium foot shooters a bit with nothing to do. But it's probably bad news for that little camel. So what's happening here is, looks like I'm actually unable to really avoid these much longer. The pike look like they're teeing up for a good old go at my elite heavy infantry. The medium cavalry is still in play. The cataphracts are still moving a lot. There's a lot of movement for two ordinary generals here, and it looks like the side chariot has come through, and he's going to have a go at this lone heavy infantryman, which will be a bit of a lottery, really. See how that happens. So with the cavalry, excuse me, with the spearmen, the mediocre spearmen coming forward, my cavalry have decided discretion is the better part of valor. They've evaded away from a charge. They've dropped back. They're going to come again, but it's all pulling this army. The bowmen have appeared from an ambush. It's pulling this army out of this protective terrain and trying to sort of break them up. But here's the real sort of pay dirt. My archers, my heavy infantry archers, are pouring fire into these medium cavalry to try and really degrade them and disconnect. If they can force them away or even kill them outright, because they are very vulnerable, suddenly it disconnects these mediocre spearmen and they can then gang up on them. They are getting a bit close to the argyaspids. This pike flank just grinds forwards. There's not a lot to really stop it, but you know, I just don't want to fight those guys particularly. So here we go. What's happened here is that the Thracians and the elephant have kind of come out of that bit of terrain, but the pikemen and the argyaspids, forming a nice little tough old block, are there, and they're facing off against one of my chariots. My chariot's not gone in, but it's just saying, look, you're going to have to charge me. You know, I'm not going to charge you. I can keep both of you there. They're both staring at each other, and that's allowed the general's chariot to kind of race off and create a threat into this empty gap. But this is really what was I was sort of hoping to achieve. This very wide unit, this super double width Death Star. The elephant only really protects the Thracians here and here, and as they've moved across, they've left a lot of empty space on this side of the table, really nothing to defend it. And my cavalry have taken advantage of that. They've just raced straight through here, piled into the end of it, and I'm catching these medium foot Thracians in the open and potentially looking at a very big hole here. These guys, I think I've actually had to leave some of those shooters over on that side, because just wheeling a very big formation is ungainly. They're rushing in. The javelin men have seen an elephant. That's what they want to do. They want to take on an elephant. These guys are having to come with them, not too keen, but hopefully there's a big mess caused by my cavalry chuntering through here quite quickly. So neutralize those guys, delay combat, initiate combat quickly where there's a good opportunity. So again, over on this side, my whole army is sort of still shuffling over as much as it can to try and get into this part. Archery going into these guys, that's a 1 hit, that's a 2 hit, they're in trouble. The cavalry are starting to come back. The elite infantry, they're not as good as these guys at combat, but they're tough. They've got rear support, they've got armor, they've got elite status. The general's there to bolster them if they need be. They are saying, look, I'm going to get in your face. If they can fight these two, it sort of takes part of this phalanx out of the game. Still means that this command is having to do a lot of stuff to deal with the shooting, which everything they're doing over here is stopping those cataphracts moving a bit further. So that's still piling pressure on, drifting out to the flanks. using the shooting, not going into combat until we've whittled some damage into these. That may be a yellow marker and a green marker in there. It may just be the way they're painted, I'm not sure. So yeah, here it goes. Look at that. The pikemen are lowering their pikes. They're going in. The Assyrian infantry are leaning forwards behind their huge shields. There's a real push and shove here. The general's blowing his trumpets. Look at that combat going on as the pikemen are just steaming in. But ultimately it's just one overlap, and these are my best, most resilient troops. If I can block 2-3 pikemen, there looks like some more at the back. If I can block the Roman Argiaspids, that does free up these guys to keep shooting. And if you see there, what's happened is there's now only, I think the cavalry have had to run away into cover behind their infantry, giving their infantry the ability to be targeted. Very difficult for the pikemen to come and expand. These cavalry have suddenly left a gap that makes my infantry safe, just because that gap was plugged by someone who really couldn't deal with shooting. And my army is much more about shooting than combat. But yeah, leaning in very much. The shove and the push is going on here. So what happens here? Commanders obviously included, which makes that a very tough pike unit, and it's already done a bit of damage on one of these units. But they've stood their ground, and now he's locked in combat as well. It's making it almost impossible for the rest of the command to maneuver around. They need to be fighting in a big solid line with everybody just going in at once. But because my army has sort of pulled that army apart with its mobility, it's split this phalanx into 1, 2, 2.5, and the other bit over there. And this guy's suddenly very busy, trying to stab people through their tower shield. And yeah, you can see now there is a marker there. The shooting is starting to have an effect on them. These medium cavalry running away behind, but they're in trouble now. They can't really come back against my better quality, better armored shooting heavy cavalry. And I've actually managed to free up some cavalry here, sort of form a line here and pick on these and bring some cavalry round, because there's just such a big hole here in the army that getting something mobile into it, if I can do that, something's going to happen. And I've got a lot of command and control here. Now these guys are engaging the enemy general. So it looks like that side chariot had a pretty good go. That's a red hit. You don't see many red hit markers for 3 hits out of 4 on those heavy infantry. But, I suppose the upside is they've not been completely wiped out. And now the general's chariot is sort of trundling around looking for targets, potentially those Thracians. That would be a pretty good one. It looks like some Thracians have come up there to widen this line. Or maybe he's going to rescue his infantry. Let's see what happens with that. But it looks like the phalanx has gone in. It's dead solid. They're going in. They've just elbowed these Argiaspids out of the way, piled in forwards. That's allowed the elephant to come forwards as well. This is suddenly pretty catastrophic for this chariot. The phalanx is good. The elephant makes the horses scared. There's overlaps as well. I just don't have enough troops here. But on the flip side, look at this. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 enemy units taking on 1 and a bit of mine, really. And look at that car crash that they're in. That's a real pile up. How are they going to unwrap themselves there? Particularly as it looks like my cavalry are not doing as well as they should do. That's a 2-hit marker, but they push past the flank. They potentially get in here. The javelinmen come in and occupy them. So these cavalry are still in a very good position should they win. And using this as a blocker to create a bit of a traffic jam for this army, splitting it all up. And also remember that the elephants, that's one command. These are in a different command whose general's over there and is fighting. So their ability to do much more out of that is kind of tricky. So what goes on here? You can see straight away. More of my infantry have come up and pinned these Thracians to protect my cavalry. My cavalry are now finally lapping round. They've used all this space. They've driven round and they are starting to make a mess of the Thracians. And when that goes, suddenly there's cavalry here right in the back of this formation that's been fought to a halt by the chariots. There's more cavalry making a feint for the baggage because there's just too many of them here, really. They've got all sorts of things to do. And this is all about giving these commands far too many problems to deal with in terms of command and control. This is another unit that's with the pikemen whose general's fighting. Are they going to be able to turn around? It's going to stop these guys doing anything sensible, and it's just forcing them into a really smaller and smaller corner. And here we go, and you can see the upshot of that is you've actually got 2 units. These might be, actually they might be the levy, maybe that's why they're hanging at the back, but all of this stuff that these commanders have been sucked into fighting has really ended up with these cataphracts being completely becalmed. No one's available to send them orders. They're all busy doing their own thing. It's all still chugging along. And again, my commander has now gone in his chariot into this Thracian who was extending the other line, creating a pretty big hole as well to potentially come into the other side of this fixture pile up here. And these guys are still fighting away somehow. So yeah, look at this. The pikes, the Argiaspids, they're still going, but my super tough guys, the elite armored, the guard, their big shields are holding up. They've still only just taken that one hit, and it's engaging this general. They almost don't need to do too much just because he's so busy. He's so locked in now. And that gap vacated by the medium cavalry, I'm just shoving my infantry through it. They can now turn onto the flanks here. They can turn onto the flanks there. This side chariot, likewise, has not had the command and control because the generals have just been too busy doing other stuff. It's not had the orders to rush forward. And my really good quality cavalry come up here, capture these guys' attention, just frees up, or it makes it impossible for them to deal with this infantry surging through that gap in the middle. So what's happening over here then? My light infantry has been killed by the elephant. Eventually, my other chariot is still in play, but my general has, boom, gone straight through those Thracians there and suddenly is in a great position. You can see again that extra width of Thracians has been caught and run over by the cavalry. So I've suddenly got cavalry looking at the back of this this command as well. The javelinmen are ready and thinking about making a run for the elephant, but again, this is all about creating a fixture pile up with too much going on that this really mobile, surprisingly sort of shooty Assyrian army can take advantage of its width. So looking back here, you can see finally the general has paid, he's paid his men. They've got the pikes down. They've run over the Assyrian heavy infantry, and suddenly they're looking at a big open space, but not too much to actually do with it. But these guys are suddenly going to start causing huge problems for them as the trumpets blow and they start looking about coming into rolling up the flanks here. And there's still the becalmed cataphracts over there. So here, of course, eventually, elephant, all the rest of it, the pikemen do beat that one chariot and go forwards. The Thracians are into my infantry here, but that still looks like a tempting target, and he has now got an awful lot of opportunities as the pike have come forwards. The cavalry have still got their opportunities ready to do it. More Thracians have been pulled away from the front line to protect the baggage from my potentially marauding cavalry. So it's kind of, well, for those elephants, it's a textbook Pyrrhic victory potentially from the situation they now find themselves in, particularly with those Thracians very badly injured as well. Over here, in some ways, this is actually not a bad result at all. Some very vulnerable to shooting troops have had to come back to block my shooting infantry here. Light cavalry, they get shredded by infantry bowmen. So actually, this is just feeding in more things to get hit there. This mediocre spearman has lost out to one of my elite cavalry. They've been shot up and then beaten. So that's a kind of a big hole for them as well. And again, it's just lots and lots of groups, lots of things going on. That makes it very difficult for this unusually low command Seleucid army to do too much about it, while the shooting keeps just chipping away and knocking bigger and bigger holes in their break point. So over here, boom, this was the thing that my army I think had been building up to, which I've talked about an awful lot. This fixture pile up, but whilst these cavalry were creating space, and see they come in, bang, here, kill some Thracians, that they come in and kill the elephant, that does damage to him. This guy comes in and hits the pike in the flank. So all of that long struggle against a single chariot and all the kind of mess which was created trying to get the right troops into place just has actually squeezed them all into a big killing zone that my free cavalry have suddenly come and rushed in, and the commanders come and rushed in. We've really forced them into a small sort of pocket and then crushed them from all sides there to leave a huge hole. Over on the other side, the side chariots finally got there, but again, I'm having to put some cavalry in to engage the general to stop him turning around. But this is just all about lasting a little bit longer. Looks like more of the other sort of poor quality infantry have been killed off there, which has brought the medium cavalry into play against my better cavalry, which is not great. But this fight, they haven't really got that far. All this combat power of all these phalanx and the other guys have really only killed one unit of the elite heavy infantry and done some damage to the other one, but it's just taken attention away from this big pile of casualties over here that must surely be seeing the end of this Seleucid army pretty quickly. And looking at this, there it is. It's the mediocre cavalry who were just a pincushion shooting target, have finally been done for by my Scythian light infantry. There was only two of them, I think, from the last time. Possibly my heavy cavalry got involved as well. But yeah, that has kind of done for them, and that's kind of the end of the medium cavalry, that soft target, the reserve force who, through the sort of failed redeployment of the cataphracts, ended up in the front line against an army that dishes out a surprising amount of shooting. So that was kind of the end of them. And you can see over on the other side, almost nothing at all left here now. All that block of pikemen, all the Thracians, bar one, have all gone. Shooting still going on to keep whittling away. This army has a lot of light foot, and a lot of its breakpoint is light foot, but I can still keep, even in this end phase of the battle, plinking away with archery to give them those little extra hits to cause them damage. And the great Greek helmet at the temple is still struggling. It's still safe, but at what cost, really? And I think that those cataphracts is almost the story of the battle. They're still becalmed there, sat in the middle, as everything else here has been crushed as these cavalry kind of rush through on this side and sweep away almost all of this side of the enemy army. So, these are the tough guys. They stood up against the phalanx. They kept the general occupied, and that is the end of this particular game.